That's right.
But hey, I just wanted to say, I wanted just to start. It's 1 p.m. and I wanted to respect everybody's time. I just wanted to say that Max, Autumn, and I, and our panelists today, we're so happy. We're so pleased. We feel so lucky to be able to share this space with everybody. So I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. You might hear a baby in the background. I got my 2-year-old here, but Anthony's under the same kind of
Yeah.
hostage situation, so we're okay. We're gonna get through this, guys.
Yes, that's right. Multitask.
For sure, for sure. Listen, my wife does it, my mom does, everyone does it except men. So now it's our turn.
That's
So
right.
give me a chuchi,
Amen, brother.
give me a hug so I can do this. Okay. So I'm just gonna do the intro, and it's gonna be real quick. But this is something that I love to do because I love to highlight how talented and how really top notch the people we're gonna be talking with today are. So this is Cy, like Cy Young, Cy Twombly, the painter.
Hey.
He's going to help us out. So Miguel Juarez, formerly an independent scholar, is a doctoral candidate in history at the University of Texas at El Paso. He has a Master's of Library Science degree from the State University of New York, SUNY at Buffalo. It gets very cold up there, man. And a Master's in Border Studies from UTEP. He has published 2 books, Colors on Desert Walls, The Murals of El Paso, 1997. And he recently co-edited the book with Rebecca Hansen titled, Where Are All the Librarians of Color? The Experiences of People of Color in Academia. And both of those were actually, sorry, that one was on Library Juice, and the other one was Texas Western Press. He's also published about arts and culture and arts documentation, the Bulletin of the Arts Library Society of North America, the El Paso Herald Post, the El Paso Times, El Sol newspaper. Guys, I'm so honored. Thank you so much, Miguel, for joining us today. Rebecca Hankins is an associate professor and a certified archivist librarian. She has been at Texas A&M University since 2003, receiving tenure in 2010. She was elected to the prestigious Society of American Archivists Distinguished Fellows in 2016 and holds the Wendler Endowed Professorship at Texas A&M University's libraries. In December of 2016, U.S. President Barack Hussein Obama, who I'm sure we all miss very much, appointed her to the National Historic Publications and Records Commission. Big, big, big deal. The funding arm of the National Archives and Records Administration. That's phenomenal. It's a 3-year position, right? As an archivist, you can understand that's crazy. That's great, amazing. Her research intersects with her professional work that centers on the African diaspora, women and gender studies, and the use of popular culture as a pedagogical methodology that offers new approaches to the study of Islam. In 2016, her book, co-authored with Miguel Juarez, PhD, was published by Library Juice Press, titled Where Are All the Librarians of Color? The Experiences of People of Color in Academia, a really seminal, integral text on really people of color in academia, especially with libraries. She has spoken twice to audiences of over 700. One of her most recent speaking engagements was for Texas A&M University's 10th annual MLK breakfast. I know that's definitely not updated, but it's still amazingly accomplished, Rebecca. I stand in awe, for real. Before coming to Emory, Jina Duvernay spent 3 years as a special collections librarian at Alabama State University. She spent several years working for the Department of Labor and the Driver's License Agency for the state of Alabama. She's also worked for the city of Long Beach. Originally from Long Beach, California, Gina moved to Alabama when she got tired of Southern California traffic. I'm almost there, Gina. I'm almost there. Gina earned her bachelor's degree in English language and literature from Troy University, her master's degree in liberal art from Auburn University at Montgomery, and her master's degree of library and information science from the University of Alabama. Gina has a family that lives in Atlanta, and she enjoys spending time with them. She loves movies and reading. Kael Moffat is a librarian in the Pacific Northwest who works for a more just and healthy world. Kyle, I can feel you on the healthy. I'm a donut aficionado, so I can definitely feel you on the healthy. He is the information literacy librarian at St. Martin's University in Lacey, Washington. He is especially interested in social justice issues and librarianship. When not librarianing, he loves to spend time with his family, kayak, hike, take photographs, and play drums. Last but not least, we have Anthony Bishop. In 2017, Anthony Bishop, who's a 2011-2012 Spectrum Scholar, Accepted a tenure track faculty position as assistant professor of instructional design in the library department with the Borough of Manhattan Community College. Really impressive outfit, changing the lives of thousands of people of color in Manhattan, in terms of business and stuff. Great school, great institute, which is also a part of the CUNY system. Graduated with an MLIS, from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 2013. Anthony's path towards librarianship was non-traditional, like many of us here, right? Prior to pursuing a master's degree in library science, Anthony earned a first master's degree in English Comp and Literature in 2012 from Chicago State University. While working on his master's degree, Anthony worked as a graduate student in the reference department at Chicago State University. Like many of us, I had a similar path after receiving his degree at Chicago State, began pursuing a second graduate degree at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. While earning an MLIS, Anthony taught English full-time at a private 2-year college in downtown Chicago. Wonderful experience. Teaching is an amazing experience for librarianship, right? Upon graduation, Anthony began working as an English instructor and reference and instruction librarian at the same institution. After 2 years working in the field, he accepted a library residency at Syracuse University. And during his residency there, he attended 6 conferences, was selected as a core in the Minnesota Institute for Library Leadership program, and presented at several panels. Folks, I have the extreme honor of saying welcome to these library leaders that we have in our midst today. And I don't want to say elders because a lot of them are like not close in age to me, so I definitely don't want to say elders, but that's the level of respect and accomplishment that I feel towards all of our panelists today, all 5 people that are going to have this conversation. Just to give you some context, Anthony Kael wrote a chapter in volume 1. Rebecca, Ina, and Miguel wrote a chapter in volume 2. And Max Macias, the mastermind behind all this, was like, look, let them have a conversation with each other. That's volume 1 and volume 2 speaking to each other. So that's Max and Autumn, really the brainiacs behind this interchange, So I just want to say thank you to everyone. I really appreciate you making it out. And without further ado, I'm going to shut my fat mouth and just let the excellence, the excelsior, just spread all over this Zoom, okay? Thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. We're glad to be here. So this is a conversation, but it's prompted by a few questions that Miguel, Rebecca, and I came up with for Anthony and Kael. So the first one, I'll just jump right in, is specifically for you, Anthony. Can you tell us how the lack of support, this is based off of your article, of course, how the lack of support while entering the profession and the lack of mentorship you received shaped how you navigate your career?
Very good question. And I would just start off with, as mentioned, I had a non-traditional track into this profession. So when I started from a graduate assistant at in the reference department, I really never saw myself doing this. I was strictly going to just, teach composition, literature, and that was it. So when I found myself going into the, for the second master's, and at that time, it just really wasn't like a lot of mentorship outside of my department that was there and available. So what this forced me to do, which was a good thing, in hindsight now, it forced me to have to just kind of take a rogue approach, so I had to actually just kind of roll my sleeves up, dig into what all came with the profession. So prior to even going into the graduate program, I was very proud to get into, all of my people from the U of I, great school, top school in our program. So I'm very proud of that, Spectrum Scholar, all of those great things, been very blessed with that. But I knew prior to even trying to apply to the program that I would be going into a situation or a professional environment where I would be of a huge minority. And so I already had to prepare myself spiritually, mentally, and emotionally for what that was going to entail. So that was a lot of soul searching with myself, my family, my wife, who She is she also went to the U of I as well. So she kind of, shares, some of what the campus would look like for me. And so it was just kind of doing that outside rogue searching, soul searching, definitely researching of what I was going to be getting myself into. And then I had to sit with myself and I had to ask myself, is this something that I really want to take on at that time in my life? This was in 2012, summer of 2012, when I, started that second master's program. And so with doing that, I was mentally ready and I had a good support system at home and I had people that I could call if things got rough, which they did. And I did have to call my wife and some peers and like, hey, just to vent. And I think so. I will say that was the benefit for me, is that the appropriate preparation helped me to be aware and be ready for what was to come. And I was the only Black man in my cohort, so there were no other. So, and I was not, that did not come as a shock to me, and so I was ready for that and all that was going to entail in and out of the classroom setting and what that was going to look like. So I will say that the lack of available upfront mentoring led me to, just kind of build my own support system to help me deal with what was to come. So.
All right, very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Kyle, the next one is for you. Becca and Miguel and I, we, after reading the article, we agree that librarians of color, like those working at HBCUs, could be effective in intentionally recruiting students into the profession. And we're just wondering if you or Anthony have any other ideas about how to attract more students of color into the field.
One of the things that Anthony and I have, another project we've been inchworming our way towards,
Yes.
has been one. So a little bit of background. My interests include media studies and cultural studies. So for me, a question that's come to my mind, and Anthony and I have talked about this, and we're trying to get together and pull together a paper on it, is do websites and recruitment materials, do they present a world in which persons of color can feel comfortable? And Anthony and I have, through preliminary looks, feel that that's probably not the case. And so from a perspective of symbolic interaction, one of the things we would like to see is recruitment include a narrative, a picture in which students of color can see themselves as librarians. Right now, that's just not the case, and we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that with the students of color enrolling in librarianship programs is still pretty low, and graduation rates are still pretty low. And one of the things that we want to do after that is try to contact students of color who have not completed graduation and try to understand why. So for me, kind of coming at it from a cultural studies perspective, I think a big step that needs to be taken is that we need to present a world in which students of color can actually see themselves. And one of the things that so what Anthony and I have done is we, kind of randomly picked images from LIS school websites. And what we're seeing is that there's good representation of students of color there, still a little on the low side, but there are not representations of people of color in leadership positions. And I think until that happens, students of color aren't going to feel comfortable in the classroom. One of the threads that Anthony and I didn't really cover as much in the article, but we talked about it in our own conversations, right? Part of that mentorship. Anthony made a comment one day that it just felt so scattered. The attempts at mentorship felt really scattered, and is that accurate, Anthony? I mean, I recall that you making that point several times.
Yes, that is very true, and right, and and as Kyle said, that's our next project that we've been, as you said, inchworming is the exact perfect way to phrase it, because it's been a couple of years now that we've been on this thing, but life and things, have kind of just
babies.
But we're actually ready to kind of go forward with this thing now. So we've been gathering things, but yeah, so we, just wanted to kind of see more images of people of color in roles of leadership in this profession. That's important. And it's to also break the stigma that has the pre-existing stigma of what this profession entails. The white woman, bow in her head, glasses, shushing people. That's not what we do. And I think that we all know that that is so far from what this profession is about. Like it's not even nowhere near in the same solar system as what we do. And so I think just in terms of through images as well as narrative of changing what the perception is of this profession will go a long way to including more people of color, more men of color in particular, in my selfish point of view, because I would love for the day to come where I'm at a place where I'm not the only one. And I still have yet to encounter that. I used to have I started in this profession as a graduate assistant actually 10 years ago. I started right during this month, right during this time, fall semester 2010, graduate assistant at Chicago State. There were 2 titles that I wore. I was either the youngest or one of the youngest and the only man of color. Now I'm old, so now I'm in the middle tread of the age group, but I still can't shake this the only man of color role. And so I would love for that to be gone as well. So
if I can throw something else in there, kind of dovetailing what Anthony is saying, is as a white male, I remember I also came oddly into the profession. I was a high school teacher first for a while, and I had a friend who's a librarian who kept telling me that you should go into library school. And so after 10 years of him saying that to me, I called him and said, I've been accepted to a library school. And he said, God, what took you so long? But I remember reading the language of diversity on ALA and thinking, gosh, this is beautiful. This is something I want to be involved with. But then, getting to library school, I think we had 2 persons of color in my cohort, both Latinx women. And so, and then of course, kind of going to conferences and seeing, oh, that's that beautiful white rhetoric again. And so, as a white male trying to wake up to my whiteness, it's important to me to see that narrative change too, because I think I kind of laugh at it sometimes. Sometimes I say, well, gosh, I love the language of the Constitution. I wish we could live up to it. And I think that's really where I'm trying to get into this, to help us live up to our beautiful words.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned conferences, and Anthony, you mentioned the stereotypes of the bun, the glasses, the pointy finger, and nowhere is that less evident than at conferences and forums and et cetera that's created for library professionals of color, such as JCLC. And so my question to both of you is, do you feel that these types of conferences are beneficial to the attendees?
They are beneficial. I don't think that they are marketed as effectively as they could and should be. So yes, I do think, whenever you have the opportunity to gather amongst your peers, your, either your profession, demographic, that's always, and both, that's always a great safe space, as this place is, that we're here now on Zoom, a safe space to kind of speak freely. So that's what these conferences provide, that safe space. But I find that, of course, we always hear about the big conferences, but I think that the conferences that market strictly towards this particular demographic that we are talking about gets not enough marketing, in my opinion, and so I think so my answer to that is yes, it's effective, but I would like to see more marketing, more dollars put behind funding these conferences as they do the big mainstream conferences that get all of the big dollars and big funding and get, the big marketing push. So yes, so that's what I would like to see.
And to play off of that a little bit, I think part of that lesser marketing, I don't know if this is conscious or not, but there's the logic of capitalism behind it, right? Return on investment. And until the library world, American library world, sees investing in librarians of color as a major investment, an important investment, I think that's going to continue to be the case, unfortunately, right? This is a really important sideshow, but it needs to become it needs to become a main feature. For those of us who remember going to movie shows with 2 films.
Right. Those days long past.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to turn it over for some further questions.
Okay. Thank you so much. This has really, really been excellent in terms of what our audience, not all of our audience, I see a lot of my family members here, not all of our audience, not all of our audience knows what librarians do or
That's right.
are librarians themselves. So I think this is giving them some type of insight into that. So I'm really pleased that you're talking about, and that's what when I read your essay, was how you grounded your essay within these theoretical frameworks that you mentioned, the cultural studies, the critical theory, the theories of whiteness. And I really like that aspect. So that your article, although it was an ethnography that talked about your own experiences, you really grounded in this literature that a lot of people don't know about. So I thought that was really great about your article. But one of the questions that we talked about when we met, and I wanted to clear up something real quick. Miguel is finished his PhD, and he is Dr. Miguel Juarez. And
Congratulations.
I am a professor now, not an associate professor.
Congratulations.
So it's small things, but
they're important.
Small but huge things. Though, right? These are very important in our world. So, yes.
Exactly. So the first question is, so one of the things that we were wondering, so we know, and you've talked about this, librarianship is pretty much a white female dominated profession. Mm-hmm. So You talked a little bit about it being men in this profession, and I know even when I went to school, there were no men in my class that I can remember, and I probably was maybe one or two people, women of color. So how has that been? Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of being men, female dominated?
That's the $64,000 question that I would love to. It is. I will say this because I've actually thought about this and I've talked about this to my peers. I have some. So where I'm currently working at, in terms of faculty in our department, I am, the only. So there are two men, one of Asian descent, and then myself. So. And the rest women from, black, white, all different, you know, creeds. But it is, I have found in each stop had I been on in this profession, I've always, the person who I had to report to, the dean or, the director or chief, has always been a white woman. And to be honest with you, in my life full-time teaching, I reported to men. The dean was so, and I can tell you that just in terms of easiness of professional democracy, I find it a lot easier to report to women than it is to men. That's just me personally. And it seems to be more of a mutual respect level. I really enjoy in this profit. That's one of the refreshing changes. Of course, there is always that need that you have to be aware of who you are and don't hide who you are within your department. And that's also a challenge that I have peers who are in different places and spaces in this profession who are of color, both men and women. And they talk about that struggle with being a person of color, being the only one and being authentically that person of color within your department. And so that has been a challenge for me at times in the early on stages. Now I'm 10 years in this, I am who I am, and so I have learned that. But I will say those are the positive thing with being in a predominant female base is that I see more mutual corporate respect. Some of the challenges is being comfortable and having to articulate and express my blackness, my urban male blackness, and not being afraid or ashamed or, having to cap that. And so I've had to learn that at each stop that I've been at, I've had to get a little more comfortable with it. And so, but that comes with open dialogue is the best way to handle that. But so that's the positive and some challenges. So just wanted to give you both.
What about you, Kael?
For me, the move into librarianship wasn't all that hard. I think I mentioned one of my best friends in college went into library school. He and I both, we started working in the library at the same time as undergraduates. He on the reference desk, I was down in the multimedia room. And the other thing I think comes into play here is I have 5 sisters and no brothers, and growing up, my father wasn't home very often. So in some ways, I think it's I had a very conflicting socialization. The outside world says this is what it means to be a man. And to be blunt, I had a couple sisters who said, no, fuck you, this is what it means to be a man. So I'm very grateful, and I'm tremendously grateful for that. I think a cultural barrier there is to to librarianship that, you know, men we have to deal with is, right, American popular culture is very poor at communicating that it's okay for men to be nurturing. And I think ultimately librarianship is a nurturing profession. So I think that that's part of the reason why there's men involved with the profession is such a strange issue, because right at the same time, while there are a lot of women who are deans of libraries and things like that, it's still a majority of the men. And so so there's a strange kind of dynamic that I'm not terribly comfortable with yes, we want men to be our leaders, but who are the foot soldiers kind of thing. My cohort, I think there were about 4 or 5 of us men in the cohort, and it was interesting. One of them had a master's in theology, so he was very intellectual, and the other one actually left library school to get a master's in divinity and became a youth pastor. So I think that many men who are drawn to the profession have this naturally nurturing component, and so I think what we need to do with this is really support that narrative that men can and should be nurturing, but at the same time, I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that, at least in academic librarianship, a lot of the deans, a lot of the leaders still tend to be men.
Yes, that you're absolutely right. Thank you for that insight. Okay, so again, we talked about the decision that this your chapter was written as this autoethnography, and it really offered you both an opportunity to speak about librarianship through this shared experience. And I really like that you quote that whole idea of the epiphany that helped you to talk about who you are. So can you say a little bit more about that epiphany that you both feel, and this shared experience of being LIS students and professionals?
Yeah, I guess I can start off, and I'll be brief so that we can, kind of keep this train moving. But yeah, I guess for me, coming as a graduate assistant, I'll be honest with you, I had that epiphany happen when I was like, wow, undergraduate, my first work study job was where? In the library, and then graduate assistant where? Reference desk, library. So I'm like, man, I can't get away from this profession for some reason. So let me look into it, And for me, teaching has been like, that's what I am. That's who I am. That's how I identify myself. And so I've always wanted, that I never saw myself in this profession initially because I didn't know about the teaching component in academic portion of this profession. Once I found that out, it just took like a semester or two at the graduate, at the reference desk where I'm teaching, how to find sources, how to do a thesis, an outline. I'm teaching writing at the reference desk.
Yeah.
And so then I also went into my profession while in graduate school in this program. So I have 4 comp courses, two comp 101s, two comp 102s, and a business writing course. And I recognize, I think we all on this call, whether you are a panelist or, you know, a person that is tuning in, if you're in higher ed, you know the difficulty that our students have from K through 12 into college with writing and researching. So I saw that gap. That was a big gap had I seen from teaching full time. And then once I started learning the skill sets in the graduate program, like, well, these things can be, you know, can be used to close this gap. And I didn't realize until I got into it how much teaching goes into it. I actually teach more now on this side, you know, than I did having my own 4 or 5 classes. You know, I teach now you know, sometimes 30, 40 classes a week, you know, and so, but the difference is, and the advantage is that I get to, versus my 4 comp classes and the business writing class, I can now teach from all across the spectrum in higher ed, from history to health science, and to try to have that moment where you can teach the important concepts of information literacy to students. Because I always, and you know, I always say this to my students, you cannot Google your way through college. You can't .com your way through college. Our students have the bad habit of, you know, this age of information has made us dumber. It's made us, we rely on non-vetted sources, and we can't write because we text. So, and so I found that in this profession, that's one misnomer that I think if we can kind of clear this up, is that if you're going, especially in the higher ed platform, you will do so much teaching that you will have the chance to deprogram and reprogram. So I'll close with that. So
I like
that. Yeah, Rebecca, in looking at the questions and things like that you sent kind of earlier, I thought this was a really interesting question. So I thought I would just say really quickly, just with the theoretical perspective of autoethnography, as I first encountered that, of course, in looking at feminist research methodology, and I really like that. I really like that method because it allows, because research, I hate the, you know, objective fantasy of research. It's really, I find it very troublesome and very bothersome. And so for me, you know, especially when we're talking, when you're talking about these moments of epiphany in your own life, to be able to, you know, try to step back and use this impersonal language is just stupid. I mean, it's impossible. So.
All right. Well, Dr. Miguel Juarez is going to ask you questions next. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the organizers, Max and Yago, for this opportunity. I'm going to preface my questions with some comments. Anthony, when I graduated from SUNY Buffalo, I was the only Latino male in the program out of, I don't know, 300 people, something like that. But it was Western New York. And I quickly want to speak regarding Kael and your present research that you're looking at medium materials.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that in my article, in my chapter, in Rebecca's and in ours book, I came up with a concept of a library report card. Mm-hmm. Imagine if we could issue library report cards to libraries, whether if they had an A or A+, or if they had an F. Right. A lot of institutions have a D, right? They're poor. They're poor in the area of diversity.
Yeah.
So that's the concept. And actually, I want to say that Teresa Marie Tobin, who I guess she's taught mostly in Queens, maybe, I'm not sure, out on the East Coast. She's created a blog on recruitment and retention. And so it's something that I've been working with her on it, and I need to write up. Actually, she invited me to this, to ALA to be on a panel, and I did a presentation of the library report card, and we actually had people fill it out anonymously. And you should have heard everything people were putting down without their names on it. So I need to write that up. But your idea of how media affects how people go or don't go into the profession, I think would be an excellent chapter in volume 3, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And I also quickly want to say that also the Hampton List Forum, which Rebecca, myself, and Gina wrote in Librarians with Spines Volume 2, is a good project that you need to follow. This is addressing many of the issues everybody has raised today. And they recently applied and received a second IMLS grant to have people mentor other people of color in the profession. Cool. I'm one of those mentors. And so, and then real quickly, to answer a question in the chat, Dr. Isabel Espinal, hi Isabel, she quickly mentioned the role of wealth disparity on whether seeking an MLS. That keeps a lot of people away because it's expensive, right? Yeah. It's expensive to enroll. You get there and you're the only person of color or the only male. And then you're in this bizarre world. You're thrown into that bizarre world. So
thank God for Spectrum, I must say, because I it definitely kept me. I got into the graduate program with zero cost, so I was able to get, through Spectrum by, being by getting the 2012 Spectrum Scholarship that gave me the full ride through graduate program. So there are revenues, or there are places that people of color who want to get into this profession, who want to cut down on the cost, because you're absolutely right, graduate school, especially if you're trying to go to the top tier schools, that it's a lot of money. It comes at a cost, but there are programs out there to help people of color, to get into these programs. So I had to, just wanted to chime in and just mention that. So.
Okay. I'd like to get into my questions, because
yes, sir.
I actually have 2 questions. So both of you, what do you think needs to happen for us to get beyond whiteness, privilege, and, like I just mentioned, class in the Liz education field?
You want to go first, Kyle? You want to go?
I tend to be a bit. I tend to get a little bit nervous around phrases like "get beyond whiteness." Whiteness is right. It's in the United States, it's a 500-year-old concept, right? And it's had devastating and differential effects on different groups of people, on indigenous groups, on people of African descent, on Latinx groups. And so in my mind, I try to think of it in terms of, at this point, how do we weaken the effects of whiteness? There are a lot of whiteness scholars who are very pessimistic that we'll ever be able to do away with whiteness. Having been raised white and been working with white people all my life, I guess I'm a bit of a pessimist as well, but I think progress can be made. And so I think what in LIS education, I think what we need to do, for example, in none of my classes did we ever approach it from anything but a white European perspective. And so one of the things I would like to see is, I would love to see LIS institutions requiring a history of librarianship course. It was offered, not required. And when I started librarianship, my library school, I had 4 kids, and so I had to had to be pretty quick about it. So I've done additional reading to understand, and one of the things to be very frustrated, one of the things that I felt very frustrated and disappointed with was the ways in which white librarians contributed and still contribute to racial segregation. So I think an important, right, for those of us who are white, not only do we not see whiteness, we are actively encouraged to not see whiteness. And so we have to learn how to get around that cultural bind. So I think that's an important first step, is we have to, white librarian students need to be taught the way that our profession has actively contributed to segregation and still does.
And I will say, to actually follow up on Kyle's point, which is well said and, right on the mark. I would also just want to add on to that, the way that this chapter came about was 2 people at a conference who met at a workshop, bonded, talked about this topic, followed it up at a bar
with good hot dogs.
Yep, went to a game. Well, it was the Cleveland Indians against the Red Sox, I believe, and we've been friends ever since. But we had an honest conversation at a conference, and we talked about this. And he was like completely honest and upfront. Like, he's like, "Wow, I was never expecting to see a black." He was like, with just being completely forthright. Like, wow, I'm really, it's good to see you in this profession. And that, that led to a robust conversation, which turned out to, lay the grassroots for this chapter that we did, but I think it takes more open, honest dialogue. There's a saying with the late, great John Lewis, there's good trouble to get into. And there are people in this profession who need to strive to get into some good trouble. If you're talking, you're teaching. If you're listening, you're learning. I think more people in the admin department in these programs need to do more learning and listening to what's being out there, because the numbers still dictate that we have a problem with diversity.
Yeah.
And this has been it's been from the beginning. But if no one is listening, truly listening and trying to, it takes dollars into marketing, it takes open dialogues, and it takes a peer-to-peer, same way this chapter came about, just a peer-to-peer conversation, 2 people wanting to do something about it, wanting to raise a flag about it. And so, what we did with this chapter, what we hope to have accomplished was to start a pattern, form, start a cycle, start a new way of doing things, and show, we're in two different parts of the country, and we thought that's what would make this so effective. A white man and black man talking about whiteness together from both those lenses. And we think that we did a good job on that. But I think that it takes more, get into more good trouble, as our late great John Lewis would say.
And if I can follow up on that really quickly, I think part of it, we have to look at LIS education structurally. What I'm thinking and what I have in mind is that I went to Emporia State for my degree. I went in Kansas, and our dean of the college had no library background whatsoever. She had been she was a corporate hatchet job specialist. The associate dean had an instructional design background, but he was such a milquetoast. I mean, it's just, it was so frustrating. And so I think we need to, I just saw some comment pop up here that whiteness won't go away willingly, it has to be destroyed. And that is absolutely true. Yes. It's because, so the program was kind of steeped in this, it was steeped in white values, and the program had a long history, and we have to figure out a way to help the profession see itself differently. I'm not totally sure how to do that. I think it's an intriguing question, Dr. Juarez. But I think it's gonna, right? I mean, it's gonna take time, and there's gonna be no silver bullet. But we have to. Gosh, here I go with war metaphors as a committed nonviolence person. I hate that. But we have to we have to figure out, we have to figure out a multitude of tools that are going to do it, because gosh, the ALA is not going to see it until we force them to see it.
I totally agree with that, and I just want just one last piece to add on. Right now, we see a shift in the world in terms of race, equity, that we've been forced because of the pandemic to sit and watch, which has impacted. It's because of the pandemic that we've seen so much of an outcry and, just so much flag waving. If we did not have, in my opinion, if not for the pandemic, people would not be caring as much about the plight of people of color as they do right now. I think that us being forced in our homes to sit and watch, and have to go back to the late great John Lewis. What happened with Bloody Sunday.
Yep.
That was at the time where people were at their houses, at home, with their families, and so the whole world saw this massacre. And I think that's what happened with George Floyd, and that just, and one or two or three other, 20 other things that have constantly happened. But I think that if I do feel somewhat optimistic that with the eyes of the world on the issue broadly, that if we can find a way to kind of chip at the pieces of what is happening right now and bring it into our profession, we can make change. But we have to find a way to chip at some of these protesters and these, just the passion that's being put out there for this cause of equality, and bring a piece into our profession. And I think that's how we can, if it doesn't happen now, I don't think it will happen in either of our lifetimes. But I think now is the turning point if we can find and can, come up with a game plan, strategy to find a way to take that passion that is being shown out there and bring it into our professions, into these conferences, and talk to ALA about making, and these graduate programs, making them really get serious about about marketing diversity. It's not just about speaking about it, put the dollars behind it. Marketing is what the big issue is. They don't market into public schools where people of color are. And so if you're not putting the program in those seats, in those eyes where where you want to say you want more people of color, but you have to market to where they are. And so
I would agree. I would stretch it one little bit more. And it's interesting you bring up Bloody Sunday. In my mind, I've kind of been thinking it in terms of, yes, the pandemic has opened up an opportunity for reflection, and seeing George Floyd just murdered in that way made me think about an associated event, right? The children being hosed down in Mobile, Alabama. That's kind of, for me, that's kind of been the image that's come to my mind. But I think we need to, I think beyond simply marketing, I think we have to demand that ALA do some of the deeper work, because just throwing up marketing plans and things like that, it's right. It's a nice first step, but it's never, that will not be enough. That cannot be enough until the structure, until the institution of librarianship begins to interrogate its own structure. That all of that is going to be is window dressing.
I just wanted to tell everybody it's 2 o'clock. Our hour is up. We can stay as long as you all want, but I want to respect everybody's time and really appreciate everybody being here. So we can continue on, but it's 2.
Thank you.
Yes, I had one more question, but for the sake of time, I think it's already been discussed. But I could ask it real quick, and if it hasn't been discussed, but I think it has been discussed.
Yeah.
Anthony and Kael, based on what you wrote in your 2016 article, what is different today and what is the same? And before you answer it, I want to say that we also have to ask ourselves who's not listening to this, right?
Right.
Who's not listening to this? Managers are not listening to this. Directors are not listening to this conversation. There needs to be spaces like the Hampton This Forum where they're all there. They have HR people there, they have directors, they have everyone's there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to create these spaces where everyone is there. Okay?
Yeah, the proletariat grumbling to itself doesn't do a whole lot.
Yes.
Well, I would like to say too that even things like what is it?
JCLC.
Yeah, they're pretty exclusive. I mean, I can't afford to go to that. And like those things need to be, and we need to be forcing this. We need to be forcing more inclusivity so people can at least attend. And I wouldn't even mind paying for something. I'm a big believer in paying for stuff, but it needs to be affordable. Right. And I think in a lot of times librarians talk of inclusion leaves that out. A lot of people have scholarships, and there you don't got to worry about it. But the people that don't, or maybe you got a scholarship that's a really small scholarship and it's not going to pay for you to go to events like that. I think it's really important to talk about that and include those people. We need new ideas in LIS. LIS is, and I told myself I was going to be quiet. LIS, we need new ideas. It's an inbred system. There's just a small inbred, intellectually inbred population in LIS, and it really impacts what happens in LIS. Cultural criticism. What is
Preach, brother.
What does whiteness do to knowledge and information? Right? If whiteness is embedded in information, and we're creating knowledge from that, we're creating information that's tainted with whiteness. What does that even mean? People don't even talk about that kind of stuff. That's like a foundational thing with information literacy, and I can't believe that it's ignored. And I'm led to believe that it's ignored because of the lack of BPOC in education.
Max is channeling his inner Foucault.
No, and I totally agree, but you know, to just kind of bring, you know, just kind of bring a call to action piece, you know, just there are ways. So we are using this Zoom platform, which we are recording, and there's ways to kind of get these talks out to the people who need to see and hear them, you know. And so I think that it's just up to us, just, you know, just each person take on this, you know, carry the cross and, you know, take on this role and be proactive and, you know, get this message out into or to the eyes and ears of the people who really need to see this and to know this and to really make a difference. Because I do agree with everything that's been said, Max and Kyle, you're right. You know, just a blanket marketing plan is not going to do anything. Yeah. There really has to be a commitment and a passion towards making this change. And that has to come from the people up top, from the people who are the, you know, deans of these schools, you know, because it really does start at the graduate school level. If we don't get more diversity at the graduate school level, we don't get more diversity in our profession. So we have to start and put our focus, you know, which is what our chapter was, which is why we chose that focus for our chapter, is the fact that we, you know, you cannot have a diverse profession without a diverse graduate you know, a graduate demographic for our students. And so that goes with marketing, but as been said, you have to really put your dollars and passion, and there has to be a want to get in and to change that stigma of what this profession is. Yeah. And really let people know how, and really how important our profession is at this time right now. Because as I mentioned, writing and researching is at an all-time deficit. Mm-hmm. And I think we all see it with our students. Yeah. I've been from a private school that dealt with just quote unquote at-risk population, to a mid-level state school, to a private, mostly white school, now at CUNY. I see the same problem everywhere I've been. Mm. Even at Syracuse, I work with students who was at their last semester of their senior year and just got to know what a peer review source is. And I was baffled, like, how the hell did you make it 3.5 years at this place and not know this? But that's a true story. And so you know, so we have to also get to the point where we're really talking about the importance of what we do and what this profession entails. So that's my soapbox.
I'm glad you said that, Anthony. Right now, I'm in the process of revising our information literacy curriculum, and that's one of the things. A couple of years ago, I came up with a new, because before we were just doing it on one-offs, one-shots, and it's just, is there anything more ineffective than a one-shot? Right. But one of the things that I've been trying to do is use the metaphor of information ecosystems to try to help students understand that they're in an information ecosystem that is different than what they've experienced before, all right, and things like that. Another thought popped in my mind, and I guess this comes back to your, I'm looking at your questions list, Dr. Juarez, the number 6 about whiteness and privilege in LIS. I think one of the things that we need to encourage, and in reading your article on the Hampton LIS forum, it was, gosh, it sounds wonderful. But in a way that was a mostly person of color affinity space. What we need to do is also create affinity spaces for white librarians who have some capacity to interrogate their position and start to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to take down this wall? And it's and through some unfortunate experience, I've kind of come to understand the importance of separate spaces, because when we whites have to start trying to deconstruct our whiteness, it can get pretty ugly for persons of color. It can get pretty painful, and I'm damn sorry for the people of color I've hurt in trying to deconstruct my whiteness in their presence, and ended up re-traumatizing them in some way. But I think that's a really another important space is another important concept is creating space where white librarians can start to pull on those threads in ourselves. It's a long track, but I think it's important.
I also want to say that whiteness is not a monolith.
Yes.
It's been shaped by many different cultures. Take, for instance, the Jefferson, they had a reunion at Monticello, and a lot of the people who, it was mixed. It was a mixed group.
I remember reading about that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think,
Are you saying that there was descendants of Jefferson's rapist behavior there?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Because
Yes.
I like to call that out, because Jefferson was a rapist, and
Right.
when you're a slave, you don't have very much choice.
Right.
And from what I know, he was raping a 15-year-old, 16-year-old girl, and
Yeah.
I mean,
Sally
among
Hemings,
others,
yeah.
I'm sure. And then there's also the aspect of how many people were raping. Like that. I mean, knowing men, contemporary men, it amazes me that people don't talk about that a lot, because that had to be a huge deal. And
Right.
yeah,
But Sally Hemings negotiated with Jefferson because they were in Europe, and she went there as a nanny, and so he wanted to come back, and she wanted to stay in Europe, but he says, no, I need you back in the States. So she negotiated, when her children turned a certain age, they would be free. So she negotiated the freedom of her children. So, it's a kind of give and take. Yes, of course, rape was involved, but that's what I'm saying. Whiteness is not a monolith either.
yeah. I'd also like to say that a lot of BIPOC have whiteness as their center, and that needs to be changed and talked about as well. There's a lot of whiteness gatekeeping by BIPOC in positions of power, some of which are in LIS. So yeah, it is not a monolith for sure.
Yeah. Well, whiteness is that whole aspect of the theory of whiteness, I think, that Kael and Anthony talked about. It isn't just white people, white colored people.
yes.
It's people, period, who have been indoctrinated, and that is their philosophy. They perform based on that whiteness too. So it definitely is not an aspect of pigmentation. It's an aspect of what their minds, how their minds think, and how they've been indoctrinated to think. So it absolutely is not just about pigmentation.
And I think that's what we were trying to accomplish with this chapter, with this, with providing the background of talking about whiteness, just, all things of ethnic background that has a ness behind it. It's not about what you see on the outside. It is how you view yourself in terms of your principles, privileges, lack thereof, how you perceive life and who you are. And if you have certain challenges because of this, or certain certain privileges because of that. And so that's right. So, that's the whole concept of whiteness that we were trying to bring, is that, it's not about the overt pigmentation of being white. It's about the ideology
Right.
of
Exactly.
what that means.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the change has to happen, that people who are benefiting from their whiteness need to be honest, have that quote come to Jesus moment,
Yeah.
and then make a platform for change. I think that's when we will see more change happen, is when people can accept their whiteness, can accept their privilege, can see how it has marginalized other people, and then come up with ways in collaboration with that group that has been marginalized on how to fix it. That's my best practice approach to
Absolutely.
this.
One of the an interesting article that I just came across a couple of months ago, to get back to this, right, to addressing this monolithic perspective on whiteness, was I can't remember the name of the authors, so I'll try to find it and post it, but it's called "Whiteness as a Strategic Rhetoric." And one of the things that they found, and their study was based, it was a qualitative study, and one of the things that they found was that whiteness is deployed in sometimes contradictory ways to protect privilege. And so one of the things I totally agree. There are different variations of whiteness. I like to joke around that sometimes that Condoleezza Rice is perhaps the darkest white man I've ever known of in public life, because, right, she defended whiteness and corporatism so ardently that sometimes it was hard to, I had, when I was in Oklahoma, I had African-American friends who were just like, I can't, I remember one time a young woman I was talking to was saying, yeah, I think she's just shoe polished herself. Right. And so, yeah, we've got to figure out how to, but that's part of the trick though about whiteness is how many defenders of whiteness understand that chimeric nature of whiteness. That, right, I mean, I'm involved, I'm pretty heavily involved with the local protest movement and community activism in the Olympia, Washington area right now. And one of the things we've started doing is when people walk by and say all lives matter, we'll, one of our responses is like, great, so when are you going to join us? Right. And so
right.
that whole idea of not understanding that this inclusive rhetoric subverts itself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tricks to that, and we've got to we've got to figure out how to get that out. Can I throw out a question? And we probably won't have time to address this, so maybe something we can talk about a little bit later. Dr. Juarez, Jina, and Rebecca. I wanted to say doctors. So Jina and Rebecca, you got some work to do. One of the things that came to my mind while I was looking at your paper, at your chapter, librarianship seems to have done a very good job of embracing the LGBTQ community, plus community. And a question that popped into my mind is, what can we learn from that kind of cultural embrace? I think that's problematic because I think on some level that embrace has been it grows out of white liberalism. So there'd be some disentanglement. But I'm wondering if there's, as we're looking at race issues, are there ways that we could look at the ways in which the library community has embraced LGBTQ communities, and how can we, what strategies can we co-opt from that to a more to a healthier embracing of racial diversity?
I could start by answering it. Was the embracing or the embrace comes when you get your MLS, right? Because before that, you know, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so, and how many individuals can get that MLS, right? A lot of people can't. So it's an economic issue.
Yeah, it is.
And so when you get your MLS, then it basically kind of levels the playing field in a way, not really. Or maybe we're
it moves. It's a move towards a more
right, right. And so that's when it starts, when you can bring in your, I think, when you can bring in your life and associate with groups, especially because the library profession, and I think a lot of people might not know this, is there's so many different kinds of groups, and the average person doesn't know that. The average person says, I don't want to put books in their cart. And, you know, first of all, they had a misconception of what librarianship is. And then they don't know there's all this diversity within librarianship.
Yeah.
These groups make a very bad, how should I say, people don't know that. And once people get into the program, then they say, oh, I could be me.
Yeah.
I could be me to a certain point, because sometimes you'll work somewhere where you cannot be you, or where you're the only person there. So you have to kind of watch yourself even now. So I know that's not the answer you're looking for, but it's on the road to getting for the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, no doubt.
One thing I want to say, Kyle, too, right, it's an excellent question, but real quick before I have to go back to daddy duties, but I did want to say this in terms of Kyle's question. In my opinion, I think what makes it work towards that particular, what makes it more embracive to that particular demographic is that you have members of that, of, you know, who are in graduate schools already, so it's not, so I think it's less of a challenge to have to market to them because they're already joining the profession, wanting to be in the profession.
Yeah.
And what, when we're talking about, Black and brown men, I think there's, that's the, it's a different challenge, because you have to get them to want to buy into the value of joining this profession. And so I think, so, just in my opinion, without seeing the numbers and data, I think that it has been easier to embrace LGBT plus because that particular group were already active participants within, LIS graduate programs, thus being in our profession. So it was easier to kind of bring them together than it is to kind of bring in, a person that looks like me, So I think that's what it is that we have to find a way to get that buy-in, to get people to want to really take part in this great profession. Because, you know, let's be honest, yeah, for all of the whiteness and things that we talk about, I think we all still have great passion in the work that we do, right? You know, and so, you know, I think it's just more stories of us sharing how great this profession is, how rewarding it is when you see those students learn how to actually research and, you know, and how to incorporate their sources properly in their work. That's a great moment, you know. And when you know, have that light bulb moment happen with your students or your patrons, it's just an awesome moment. And so I think that that's, you know, I think that comes with something that we have to do a better job of marketing. I hate to just keep that word, sorry, so I have to find another, but to give more testimonial, that's it, of the work that we do, not marketing, but to, you know, but to give more first person, second person, third person, you know, just these testaments to what we see and the benefit of being in this great profession. So that's
But I will also say that the LGBTQ plus community has not had it easy. And I agree definitely with what Autumn has written here about the fetishization of the LGBT community, and moving them into whiteness was very easy. But if you're talking about the BIPOC community, getting them who are LGBTQ plus, you know, is still an issue. So you're still having that issue of those people of color, you know, getting even the LGBTQ community being a part of the profession and giving the same opportunities. So yes, there are all types of programs to encourage, you know, all of us to be a part of this. But who are we, as you're saying, Anthony, who are we marketing to? Right. And who is still, you know, a part of that whiteness? Right. And so that whole issue of whiteness can be extended to so many other different white groups. Right. So right, it's right. Not right. It's not the same for well said. LGBTQ.
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca and Anthony completely. I also was looking at your comment, Autumn, and I think that generally, you know, if we're looking at it through whiteness, it's almost like when BIPOC people apply for positions and whatnot, you know, there is going to be a bias there from those interviewing these folks, and be like, you know, does this person fit in our organization? Are they going to be able to work with us? Are we going to be able to work with them? Are we going to be able to understand? And even if you do say, oh yeah, we need to get a BIPOC person in our institution, then once they're there, you know, and you need somebody to do your diversity work, don't automatically black person to do that work, to do that extra labor, you know. So there's almost a fetishization there as well, you know.
Perfectly said. You're right. That is so right. Because that has been so offensive to me, what you just said, you know, like, you know, being so each time there's something that, you know, deals with you know, trying to get it more diverse, and they run to me to go be the spokesperson, and I'm like,
absolutely, okay. Absolutely. And therefore, when you were saying, Anthony, that when, you know, students find when you're in library school, there's so many aspects to librarianship and so many wonderful things to do, we somehow get stuck in the diversity box. Yeah. Which that work is important. That work is work we do want to do. We never seem to, you know, not never, but it's rare that we're all automatically seen or you know, sort of asked to do any other work, you know, where you're thought of for the diversity work. And so how can we branch out into these other areas and be visible, you know, when it's outreach or when it's, you know, teaching, instruction, these sorts of things. You know, how do the students even get to see you if they don't see you, if you're not you know.
That's
You're
So,
doing everything else.
absolutely everything else.
Well, I mean,
very
and
well
it's,
said. Thank you for
and
yeah.
it,
I quickly want to
dead
say
on.
that once I was in a graduate program in California, and this person, a white professor, came up to me and said, "You're going to be a model for your people." And I said, "My people? Can you define who my people are?" And she was a little bit confused. And
A
yeah,
little.
I think as a white person too, I think there's a problem in that because it gives this impression that this is work that people of color need to do, that
Right.
white people don't need to be involved in this diversifying work. That's a terrible way to say it. But it's, yeah.
Well, Miguel, when you were saying that the person said you were going to be like a model for your people, you know, that is funny. But in reality, you know, when you are a librarian and you are at the reference desk and you do, you know, for me as a Black woman, you know, have that, there is that extra labor that may not be visible to everyone else because some students only want to come to you.
That's true.
Go to that white person that they didn't feel, you know, kind of saw them and heard them and nurtured them and spent that additional time with them. So they continue to come to you. And while that is your job or whatnot, you have some people that just don't have to do that. And you find yourself, you know, at least I did find myself having the extra labor of the additional, you know, students walking into the office to sit and then talk to you, just talk, you know, and
Yeah.
so it's just,
You are
it's
preaching.
layer upon layer upon layer because of that familiarity that they have with you that your white counterparts and colleagues don't even, they're completely unaware of, you know, that you're doing all that extra. So, so yeah.
Preaching.
Exactly.
You are definitely preaching, yeah, because I can say this real quick just to what you just said. And it's, you know, this doesn't go in our review, you know, each year, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, each year I'm up for a tenure. It doesn't speak to how, you know, how our school, 27,000 students, 60% of color, you know. And so with me being up, you know, up, so there is an Asian man who was older, who was in a totally different department, you know, but yet he still is, you know, tenure track faculty, but he doesn't do the, you know, reference work, the teaching work and everything. So when the students see me at the reference desk or in the classroom, I get bombarded with emails following up, or, you know,
but then
now
you might get asked why you're not getting your work done or that
right
done, you know, but they don't know that your door is being
exactly. And I've actually had to have that talk with people who like, wow, you know, you were missing here. I'm like, well, I had 2-3 students, so I couldn't make this meeting. Sorry, but you know, these are things that's not part of our job. You know, it's the unwritten rule of being the person of color in our department. That
but it truly is a labor of love. It is a labor of love, but it's labor.
It is labor. It's uncompensated labor.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's like you said, when you have your evaluations, when you want to say, yes, I worked with X, Y, Z number of students, and that is where I've been spending a lot of my time doing counseling, doing you know, listening. They don't recognize that as part of your service.
That's right.
And furthermore, that's something,
part of your job.
but that's something you can't even prove either, right? So you have every time somebody leaves, you have to take a selfie with a student. You know,
right? Exactly.
What are you going to do?
Or just, you know, show, you know, look at all these students who have emailed me. You know, it's like, so like, you know, who wants to do all of that? You know, and it's just, you're right. But that's something that I think you know what? There's another chapter right there in itself.
I see that chapter, Anthony.
Yes, you're right. I'm like, my wheels are turning. I'm like,
That's
there's
volume 3.
Exactly, volume 3. There are
Volume
2
3 or 4 or
chapters in this
5.
upcoming volume that I think we need to really put together. So
I'm down. I'm down.
okay, cool.
Max, it's going to be an encyclopedia set.
I know, right?
I think we better wrap it up because we can go all night. But it
I
has
know, you're right.
pleasure.
Exactly. And
It has
yes,
been a pleasure.
This has been
but
great.
let's follow up via email and just
Yes.
keep this going. But I definitely do see some work that we all can do together
Absolutely.
in the next
And
volume.
to kudos to all the people that stuck with us.
Yes, thank you all for sticking with us on this. You know, we were very passionate as you all, but yes, thanks. Yeah, because I was like, wow, we gonna still have 10 people still hanging in there. So I hope that meant that you got something out of this. But just thank you all for this time to just have this platform. So just
Yes,
kudos
absolutely.
to everything.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Yes,
Hey,
thank
Gina?
you all.
Video will be
Yes.
posted.
My mom grew up in Long Beach as well, so
Oh,
and and my wife also grew up in Southern California, and we've been talking about, you know, possibly looking at positions and things like that. And you know what? The 3 things I really miss about Southern California: Dodger Stadium, jazz clubs, and art museums. And you are totally right. The traffic is atrocious, and
it's
Fires that are
awful.
going on
But
too.
not the food? You didn't mention the food?
oh, what? You know what? We have great food. Oh my gosh, we have some wonderful restaurants up here. So, but yeah, my wife and I actually did talk about. Yes, yes, you're right.
I'll be there
Chavez
when you
Ravine.
get ready to get there. All those things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm old enough to remember that it took that at one point in time it only took about 25 minutes to get from La Crescenta, Glendale area to LAX. So that tells you what a dinosaur I am.
Yeah.
So that's when the orange orchards were still there, or what?
I do remember seeing a lot of orange orchards coming down. So, yeah.
Right, you all.
Okay.
Thank you for the time, and I will be following up with you all
Great meeting.
via
I look forward to
email.
it.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to it.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Number 3 in mind.
Okay.
Now
Thank
the
you
video
all too.
posted up on librarianswithspines.com very soon, in a day or 2.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn. Thank you, Max.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.